Learn the most empowering hiring techniques. Land the most desirable talent. Launch your company towards massive success. This is the Higher Power Radio Show with your host, Rick Girard.
All right, a person quitting your organization should never be a surprise. Now, it should be a planned event that is supported and celebrated by the leadership team. There should be a plan in place to fill the gap and a person or two in the process to take ownership of the role. Now, when a person gives notice out of the blue, it's a clear sign that the health of your organization is quite low because the employee does not trust that communicating their dissatisfaction or interest in leaving is in their best interest. Now, this creates those oh shit moments within leadership when panic sets in and pressure to fill the seat quickly takes rise. We go into triage mode to minimize the pain. Now, this is the moment when most companies resort to reactive hiring, which drives bad hiring decisions. Now, a simple game of red light, green light isn't just for kids or the show Squid Games. It is a highly effective tool in employee engagement, productivity, and plan exits, ultimately avoiding poor hiring decisions for your organization. I'm Rick Girard, and welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show. We help entrepreneurs and business leaders win the strongest people. We do so by sharing insights from top-performing rebel entrepreneurs, game changers, and industry leaders like our guest today, Mr. Bryan Neale. Bryan is the founder and visionary of Blind Zebra. Now, he's a self-proclaimed walking fun fact. He was a drum player in a punk rock band in high school. He's the founder of the Indiana University Dance Marathon that has raised over $50 million. He's a winning contestant on The Price is Right with Bob Barker. We did not even talk about that, but I want to hear a little bit more about that. Host of the longest running sales podcast in history. He's a Super Bowl 56 umpire, and he's the creator of Blind Zebra sales operating system. So more importantly, he's also a down-to-earth and approachable guy who never forgets his small town Indiana roots, which is what makes Bryan the perfect expert for today's topic. Bryan, welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show today.
Thanks, Rick. That's really, really great intro. Thanks for letting me be here. I didn't know we didn't talk about the Price is Right thing.
No, but like you run The Price is Right with Bob Barker?
I was on The Price is Right with Bob Barker. It was 1994. I think I actually won a refrigerator, got on stage and lost my game, spun the wheel, got second place in the wheel, but it was a fantastic experience and something I love to talk about. So many people say, I want to be on The Price is Right. I want to go on a game show. I'm like, well, step one, first domino, you got to apply. Send your, I sent the old self-addressed stamped envelope in back in the 90s. You know what I mean? Next thing you know,
way. Is that
on the stage, old school. Yeah, old school.
So they already have the contestants picked out.
Kind of. That's it. We don't have time today, but I will absolutely tell you the process. It's not random. I'll tell you it's not random, but it's also, you don't know you're selected. You're surprised when they call your name.
That is so super cool.
Totally. Yeah.
All right. So we're going to talk a little about this concept of red light, green light, which is something that you've actually implemented in your business. But let's talk a little bit about the story first on how this came to be, right? So walk me through kind of the scenario.
Yeah, of course. So as a coach, business coach, for years, part of my delivery was I did one-on-ones for all my clients. And I'm sure if you're a coach, Rick, or coaches that are listening to this, you're in a one-to-one situation, you hear things about people's lives, business and personal, all the other things. And inevitably, at some point in time, I would hear people that were wanting to leave their job to go somewhere else. And it was weird because their client, their boss's boss was paying me to coach them. And they're telling me they're leaving. I always felt really uncomfortable. I had confidentiality there, just kind of weird. And then I'd watch them operate. They'd take a personal day on a Tuesday, and go put a suit on and go to a Starbucks. I'm like, well, where's Sydney? Well, she's got a personal day. I'm like, on a Tuesday? Everybody knew what was going on. And then do the proverbial, hey, 4:45. Hey, can I grab you for 10 minutes at 4:40, Rick?
Or it's a doctor's appointment, right?
It's all the above. It's just lying. It's just lying. It's like, it's all so messed up. Then I would go drop a 2-week notice on you. You'd get upset, whatever, try to save me or not, walk me out the door. It was all clunky. And it was all just bad for everybody. Now I got a hole. Now I go put a resume thing out. I go to one of the big, resume places and post a job. Then I get a bunch of resumes. Then I pick the dog with the least fleas. And I see this happen over and over and over. I'm like, this is so dumb. Why don't we just talk openly about this? So I had a client who told me this in one of her one-on-ones. And I said, what do you want to do? She said, I want to stay home with my kids now. I'm like, well, why don't you just tell Josh that? Josh was her boss, real person. Well, he might fire me. I'm like, well, if he does, he does. But it makes no sense for you like skirt around this. So I said, why don't you just tell him your tour of duty's up? That sort of popped out of my mouth one day. And give him a couple months to find your replacement. You can train him. Then everything's above board and we're not worried about anything. He doesn't stress out about you leaving instantly. Yeah. And so that's what we did. And that was probably 11 years ago at this point, in May, 11 years ago. And as soon as that happened, I'm like, this is the way to do it. And so since then, I, in my own business at Blind Zebra and with all of my clients, share with them this concept of tour of duty, of basically above board employee-employer relationship that just makes the whole thing so much easier.
All right. So it's not the video game.
It's not. No, it's not. Wrong guy for video. Talk music. Yeah. Football a little bit. Video games. I'm not your guy. Galaga's my only deal. I'm dating myself now. So.
No, I totally, that was the first kind of when you talked about tour of duty, I'm like, wait, the video game?
Yeah,
okay.
No.
Not that. I mean, and this brings up a really interesting point, right? Because how do we parlay this to, like, when you embed these things into the culture, and we're going to delve into how you actually do this, but this is something that you need to do in the interview process. This is something that you need to do. Like, I find that these conversations don't happen during an interview either, that actually convey to the person that you're going to hire that, hey, it's okay that you're gonna probably move at some point.
Yes.
We don't plan on you being here for 20 years, but our environment cultivates, communication. Yes. And we want to make sure that you're always in the right seat.
Yes. For everybody. I mean, if you look at even the generational shift that's happening. So my parents were baby boomers, and I worked for Procter & Gamble, my first job. When I called my mom after 5 years at P&G and told her I was going to go off and start my own business, you want your mom to be proud of you. Like, I'm so proud of you. Go get him, son. She starts crying. I'm like, why are you crying? She said, well, you could work for Procter & Gamble. It's such a good place. You could work there for 35 years and never have to worry about money. And I'm like, but I'm miserable. I don't want to do that. And then I don't have too many of my Gen X friends, and then definitely millennial Gen Zs who have this wiring that I'm going to go work at a major corporation for 40 years. It just isn't in the DNA. Some do, but most don't. And so instead of fighting against that, let's just embrace it and say, you're going to work at Blind Zebra for a period of time. That's going to be your tour of duty. And at some point, you're going to want to leave and go do something else, or we're going to want you to leave, and we'll celebrate you and celebrate you out.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Are you listening to the Higher Power Radio Show? I'm your host, Rick Girard. And for our podcast listeners, we're going to take a quick educational moment from our sponsors. All right, I'm digging in deeper with Bryan Neale. He's the founder and visionary of Blind Zebra. And we're talking about how red light, green light can drive organizational success, right? So we just talked about a little bit about the problem that your aha moment in how you did this. So let's talk about tour of duty a little bit deeper, if you don't mind. Let's go into that, Bryan.
Yeah, sure. So that, and I'm like you, Rick, we're very tactical at our core. Like, it's one thing to say fluffery and, theory. I like to actually do things. And so this is something that you take a really good concept. One of your listeners, multiple of your people listening to this are going to go, oh my gosh, this happened to me. I just got a surprise exit. Someone came and left. I didn't know they were upset or whatever. So that's what we're fixing. So how do we do it? What's the process? So the first thing that we want to do is embrace this idea with guiding principles that it's okay if people come and people go. We believe our two primary guiding principles for us around tour of duty are abundance and intention. I believe in the abundance of a market, which means that there's way more people available to work at Blind Zebra than I could ever employ. And the time's going to be right when the time is right. I have an abundant attitude about that.
Okay. So that's a huge point right there. And I want to I've had so many CEOs to me, it's really hard to find people. We can't find people. Okay. There's a key point here, is that most of the time you're fishing in the wrong pool.
Yeah.
Like, it's like you're going to go tuna fishing in a lake, right? Like, stop looking for high performers on Indeed, or
Yes.
like, or like, look for people where they are, not where you kind of hope that they are, right?
So good. I love that. There's another word that we didn't plan to talk about it, but there's another tool that we teach. It's related to the tour of duty, called virtual bench, which is just what you're saying. We should be courting people all the time who are
Mhm.
employed that are high performers,
Yep.
not getting these surprise exit, posting on Indeed and picking the dog with the least fleas, like I say all the time.
So I
So,
do every Friday, I put into practice. I have an hour and a half sprint that I do, and I call it filling my funnel.
yes.
And I have a spreadsheet. It's all old school, but I have a spreadsheet, and I look at my org chart and I go, where am I going to have gaps, or where am I going to need to hire in the next year?
Great.
And then I go on LinkedIn for an hour and a half, and I just send out messages to people that I think might be worth talking to.
Yep.
And and one of the things that I tend to look for is I look for people who are cross industry. I don't look for my competitors, because I
Love it.
want people who are like geared up. There's a lot of people that, like, the most successful hires that I've placed in my career have been people who have come cross industry. It's not like, hey, we want you to come do the same job you're doing there, but for less money.
Right. Not at all.
Right.
No, there's this core set of skills that can be applied in different industry, even different roles sometimes. I'm a
Yeah.
huge fan of that. I always want to say this is a tactical takeaway people can take that's even, again, adjacent to tour of duty, but you should be able to show someone your virtual bench. If you're a leader of a company, you should be able to show, I can show you mine on my phone. It's right here. If I can pull it up and I can show you their names of humans. And then I want to have interaction with those humans, not even recruiting interaction, just nearby proximity interactions 3 times a year. That's it. So it's not weird if I call you, I haven't talked to you for 5 years, and hey, Rick, what's going on? Bryan Neale from Bryan Zebra. What's been going on since the last Winter Olympics? Like, that doesn't, it's weird. But if I've talked to you, did this, we talked, I'm like, hey man, something want to run by you. So we've got this, and then you'll say yes or no. And if you're open, we'll talk. And if you're not, we'll carry on. Right.
Totally. Well, introduce to me the concept of the red light, green light.
Of course. So now we put it into practice. So we have this belief in the abundance of the market. It's funny when your clients say, it's really hard to find people. I'm like,
it's not.
There are 7.5 billion humans on the planet. You can't tell me you can't find one. There's 370 million in the United States. And it's like, what are we doing here? So it's just a flawed philosophy. It's just what you said. There's another problem. I believe in the intention that I want people to do well, whether they work at Blind Zebra or someone else. I want them to be fulfilled when they go to work. They shouldn't have Sunday scaries. To a degree, I get people get a little stressed out, but they should be inspired to go to work. They should really enjoy what they're doing. And then when that starts to wane, which it might for all of us, then that becomes a thing. So how do we put that into practice?
Scaries, is that the, oh, should I have to go to work tomorrow?
Yeah, that's the, especially like the millennial Gen Zs would tell you, they're like all Sunday afternoon, they're just churning in their stomach about work. And it's like, I get there's a little bit of like good nervous energy. Like when I go on a football field still after, 11 years in the NFL, I still get a little nervous, but it's good nervous. I'm not like terrified throwing up Saturday night that I got to go out there and ref a game. So, so we then contextualize this very simply with some extreme amount of common sense. Green means that I'm good and the employee is good. I'm the employer. I own Blind Zebra with my wife, Stephanie, and we talk to an employee and they're green. We're green. We're good. They're fulfilled. We love what they're doing. They love doing what they're doing with us. It's awesome. Yellow means one of the two of us is starting to waver a little bit. We're starting to think maybe we've got wrong person, wrong seat. Maybe the success, the metrics or the KPIs that we want this person to hit in the seat isn't happening. Maybe they're bored. Maybe they want to go do a different role. So now we're in this yellow territory, and all yellow does is precipitates a good, open, real conversation that just talks about what's happening. Is it a role issue? Is it a performance issue that can be corrected on our side? We just talk through it. It might be a series of conversations. Usually it is because we want to take care of people, and we're not hasty here. And what we're trying to figure out is, can we go to green, get it back to green where they're fulfilled, we're happy, or is it going to go to red where it means one or the other, and it doesn't have to be 2 votes. One or the other says, you know what, Rick, it's been real. Tour of duty is coming to an end. Then the practical thing I tell people, and this is just me being super old school and from the Midwest, the only thing you have to do, and this is timed, meaning we'll give someone a 45, 60-day window. It's not a severance. They're still with us, is you have to look me in the eyes, shake my hand, and just tell me you're going to work and do your job while you're looking for your next gig. Just tell me that face to face. That's all you got to do. And I trust you, and I will help you find your next gig while I'm finding the person that's going to take over your spot. This can be a 2 months. So people think, well, that's a lot of time. And no one trusts anybody. I'm like, well, they're going to check out. I'm like, they won't. I'm telling you, they won't, because you've given them this new space. It's this etheric kind of, agreement that we have. It's not, people don't take advantage of it. And you know what? Tour of duty is good. If they do take advantage, then do what you used to do and fire them on the spot. Have them walked out by HR. That's pleasant. You know what I mean? Get the security cop into that thing and leave their keys and humiliate them down the hallway. That's what you used to do. Do that. So you kind of can't lose.
Well, I'm sure there's companies that still do that, right? I mean,
100%. 100%.
It's very common. When I was running a recruiting firm, when somebody would give notice, it was just the policy. This is actually like my mentor, like my boss's policy was, you give notice, you walk them out the door.
That's it. I know.
Because you think they're going to steal your information.
I know.
And like that was the mentality. And what was interesting is that I didn't carry that through when I moved to Hawaii and started up my recruiting firm. I didn't carry that through at all. I was like, hey, let's talk about time frame. Can you give me this amount of time so we can replace you and we can train somebody up? And you know what? Nobody stole anything from me.
No.
I mean, I was a terrible manager at the time, but at least I was open and honest.
Well, think about this. This is where people like, it's easy to see from the outside. If someone is going to steal info, they've already stolen it before they leave. I promise you, they've got some sort of drive backed up where they've got all the content. They're not going to like give you notice and then start working on stealing the info. It's too close to the stove at that point. It happened way beforehand. So just and if they steal your info, they do. Everyone can find everything these days. Like, what is everyone worried about? It's just, it's a scarcity mentality for me.
I totally agree with you 100%. And, like if they can steal it all they want anyway, they still have to execute.
That's right. Right.
And they're probably not going to.
No. Yes.
I had a really unfortunate situation where when I moved to Orange County, I did it to work with a friend of mine, and we had a bad ending, and he walked out and actually took my service agreement, and my company was Stride Search, and he white out the D and made it a V, so it was Stride Search, and sent it out to all my customers.
How's his podcast doing? I'm sorry, that was snarky. That was snarky. He's probably got some huge podcasts, but yes, it's like it just makes no sense to me. I want people to have the space and the freedom to move around in their life and let them be happy. If they're leaving, there's something that's not fulfilling in their life. And I don't want them to sit at my shop and be unhappy. Makes no sense at all, in my opinion.
And you know what? I learned a valuable lesson from that. It's not worth the fight either.
No, God, no.
Yeah.
What a waste of energy.
So much. And you know what? Part of me, like, I've been a fighter my whole life. So, I kind of learned that there's some fights that just aren't worth it.
No,
you know what I mean?
There's a book called The Tao of Sales, like TAO, like the Tao. This guy wrote a book taking Buddhist principles and putting them in. And one of the elements I love in this book, the chapter is called Fight Resistance with Non-Resistance. Fight resistance with non-resistance. Go in the flow of what you would normally move against. So you turn in the current, which is if someone is leaving, that's what we have a phrase at Blind Zebra. We tell everybody this when they're getting hired. Even if we fire you for lack of performance, we celebrate you in and we celebrate you out. We will have a going away party for you, even if you don't perform, which we do. And people make cards for people that are getting fired. Then they get fired and they leave. Like, what was it like to be at Blind Zebra? Like, it was awesome. They were so nice. Even when they fired me, they were awesome. And it's a great branding. It's a great way to be, in my opinion.
That's a great learning moment for me. And I think for everybody else too, the celebrating people out, we just don't, it's like, oh, well, again, there's that mentality that, once you leave, you're dead to me.
Right.
I had somebody else on the show that had a similar thing, and she talked about boomerang hires.
Oh yeah.
And how she'd send people off with a party, and what she found was that her high performers that left, they probably left because they're getting paid more money or something else. They ended up going to a complete shit show company.
Yes.
And they realized that the culture was much better over here. And I was happy at that company. And then they would come back a year or two later.
Yes. That's it.
And,
And yes. Yes.
and
Yes.
it,
Yes.
like, I mean, hey, there's no better, there's no better thing than somebody who already knows your environment coming back in going, oh my God, I was on the outside.
Yes.
It was terrible.
Yes. And I'm glad that they went and tried that, because
Yeah.
what a shame if they would. I've always wondered. I can't stand people like, I always wonder what it'd be like if I'm like, just go do it. You can always come back. And then the timing might be wrong on our side. Then the timing's wrong. It's a big, abundant world. You go on and find the next thing. I just think we make this way more complicated than it needs to be, in my opinion.
For sure. I know I tend to do that in my life naturally. Um, all right. So you stepped it out for me. You kind of touched upon operating from your guiding principles and approaching the market from abundance. Anything else that's important in that guiding principle?
And the guiding principles, just know that that's the foundation of all the action when you go to implement things like the stoplight, and then things we'll talk about here in a second with the actual calendared meetings around tour of duty. Never lose sight of the guiding principles, because they'll sneak in on you. Well, we can't lose them. This is what I hear. And this is one where, I got to work. Like, we got a really important employee and I'm like, man, if they leave, my job is going to be super hard. It's a very selfish way to think, but it's very real. And I really think that. And so I've got to make sure I go, you know what? The person's not the only one on the earth that can do this. There's someone else that can do a good job. That's the abundant flip. And I've got to make sure I always anchor to those guiding principles, because it's easy to get away from them, especially when you talk about losing
really easy to get.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really easy because we also live in a fear-based world, right?
Yes.
So Murphy's law, whatever can go wrong will go wrong. And we believe these things to be true.
Yeah.
Quick weird side note is that I had a friend come to me, and she's training to be a manifestation coach. And so I've been working with her for the past few months.
Yeah.
She's got me reading again, Think and Grow Rich.
Yay.
Which, that's an old one, right?
Old.
But she's got me actually studying it. And it's so true how when you shift your mindset, your life becomes easier.
Sure does.
We tell ourselves this is hard, and we tell everybody that's hard, and then we make it harder.
We do, really do. I almost wonder if it's like self-fulfilling.
It is.
Like it's really hard to find people, Rick. And your clients say that to you over and over, and they hear themselves saying it. So why would they ever believe different? Because there's core. It's hard to find people. It's hard to find people. It's hard to find people. Of course it is, because that's how you're wired right now. Instead, say, man, there's like billions of people on the planet, and there's surely one out there that fits for what I'm looking for right now. So I'm just going to be open to that. I can't wait to find them. Can't wait to meet them. Wonder where it's going to be. That's an abundant mentality.
Well, we've got clients that we worked with that they don't ever market for hiring. I mean, they have a flow. They've done such a great job with setting in a company environment that people come to them. They don't ever have to advertise. They just have a consistent flow of people coming to them saying they want to work. I heard a lot about your company. I want to work for you.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Love that. Love that. We just had that. Right. We just had a woman say, hey, I want to be your intern next spring. It's like, okay. Anyway.
That's great. Okay. So step 2.
Yeah. So we've got that. Now we need to contextualize. This will be a takeaway for the listeners. We've got to write our speech. We've got to be able to articulate our why we're doing this. So I've got my own version. It comes from the heart now. It's not memorized, but it's really important that people jot down why they're doing tour of duty. Because without it, you said earlier, Rick, we live in a fear-based world. When you share this with people, it scares people sometimes because they're scarcity minded. And they're like, I don't know about this. And you mean, it's really, so you have to really contextualize and keep people safe. Is the next step.
That's a good thing, by the way, too. If somebody's too scared, they shouldn't work for you.
100%. That's right.
Yeah.
That's why I love this as a recruiting tool, because it's differentiating. Number one, very few people practice this tour of duty concept. And you're right. If someone's too scared of that, like, no. I want to sneak around and look for my second job while I'm working for you. Then I don't want them working for me. Right.
Yeah.
And then the next tactical step 3, and this is where it all happens. This must be part of a quarterly conversation with every direct report that you have. And that needs to be scheduled. And so everyone that works at Blind Zebra knows that part of their quarterly conversation with their direct manager includes an agenda item that says tour of duty. And everybody knows what green and yellow and red means. And everyone has the openness and the safety, us included, to say, hey, how are you tour of duty? They say, I'm green. We can say we're yellow. And it precipitates a conversation. Now, they still may not like that. This doesn't solve all problems when I say, hey, Rick, so, you love it here, blind zebra. I'm like, well, actually, I'm yellow. And you're like, okay, good. That's awesome. You're like, oh, what? It feels like something's off, but it is. So we have to talk about it. And I'd much rather do that than call you into my office at 4:30 on Friday and say, hey, man, I got some bad news. Today's your last day, and send you home to your family. That's just awful.
And by the way, never get rid of people on Fridays.
Yeah, good point. Good point. That's bad.
No. But I see
people do it,
all
don't they?
The time.
Yeah, they do it.
I mean, I was coaching somebody the other day. They're like, we're gonna get rid of somebody. I'm like, wait until Monday.
Totally.
Or Tuesday. Because guess what? They're gonna have the whole weekend to sit around. They're gonna go through every form of grief.
Yep.
There was some data I read like quite a few years ago that like people who get fired on a Friday file the most employment litigation cases as opposed to somebody who gets let go on a Monday or Tuesday.
Wow.
Because they have the ability to just like they update their resume and they go back to their job search.
Yeah.
They're not sitting around brewing for 2 days.
All right. They take their Rick and Bryan voodoo doll out, start right?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you just ruined somebody's weekend, right? Like
100%, right?
Yeah.
Bad intention goes back to intent.
All right. So now, if it's every quarter, let's say somebody, like, hey, look at, you've just fallen into the yellow zone for me.
Yeah.
You call an impromptu meeting?
Not. Along the way, our experience has been quarterly's enough. Quarters go really fast. People don't think they do. They go really fast. And what the quarterly conversation requires you to do is to not overreact to situations. And what happens is people have this stoplight thing, and an employer or employee, either one of them, gets pissed about something or something went wrong. They're like, screw it. I'm yellow. I'm red on Rick. He's out, like, calm down. We let's give some time. And when you feel going into a quarter, you're yellow. At the end of the quarter, you're still yellow. You're yellow. There's no doubt. You've got some evidence built up.
Yeah.
And you can go the other direction. We had someone, really, really great person, who worked for us, who went yellow to red real quickly. We figured out why. We switched roles. She ended up staying for 3 more years with us at Green.
So you moved her into a
totally new role. Yeah. Basically created a seat for her, and it worked out brilliantly. And then she moved on to a new thing. She had some desire to do something that we don't do, and we couldn't give her that. And so she's super happy. And then Steph and I had dinner with her and her husband 2 weeks ago. And you know what I mean? And her boss said, make sure they don't try to hire you back. And I'm like, well, it's tour duty. Like, it's part of the deal.
Yeah. Make sure you do a good job managing her, because she'll just come back.
Exactly. It's yes. Yes. And if the time's right, she'll come back. And if it's not, she won't. It's like very simple.
So, we hear a lot about right person, right seat. Yeah. And what's interesting is that a lot of times, that right seat, what that means is that, are they satisfied in doing the work that they're doing? Like, are they thriving in the work that they're doing? Right. Mm-hmm. And so the fact that you were able to find a different seat for that person, I don't think most of it think of it in terms of that. I think it's kind of like, well, I don't have an open role.
Yes.
And maybe I didn't talk to Joe over there to see if he has an open role, but we'll just let you go.
Yeah.
It's silly, especially when you have high performers. And here's the thing, high performers want to continue to grow and learn. That's been my biggest differentiator as a recruiter, being able to I can pull people out of companies because they feel like, I had somebody say to me one time, in order for me to move ahead in this company, somebody's got to die above me.
That's pleasant.
Can you imagine how that person felt? Like, there's no room to grow or do anything else. I'm just in here pushing buttons.
Yeah. And wishing, danger on my colleagues above me. It's crazy. Yes.
It's not a good place to be.
No, not at all. Not at all.
All right. So I love this. Thanks for sharing that. So, shoot, we're getting pretty close on time. What would be 2 or 3 key takeaways you can give the audience they can plug into their business today?
Yeah, sure. And some of these are just doing the things we talked about. I'm a big fan of the easiest first step. Yep. The easiest first step in this is to schedule your tour of duty for we're recording this. I'm time-stamping this a bit, but we're in the end of third quarter for whatever the next quarter is. So for us, as we're recording on the day we're recording, it's Q4. So take your calendar out and go to all your direct reports. Say, hey, I want to schedule a tour of duty for October 8th or whatever the date is. So
Yep.
schedule. Now you've got to prep for it. Then you move in to documenting two other elements. Document your guiding principles. You can steal mine. I stole them. I didn't come up with abundance and intention. Like there's a billion books they're, pre-written. So
But those are actually based on your core values,
100%.
primarily, right?
Oh, 100%. Yes.
Yeah. So you don't, if you have core values, which most EOS companies do, or most, actually a lot of companies do these days,
yes,
you just kind of build those guiding principles around your core values.
that's exactly what we do. Because you get, when you come to interview with us, you get the core value speech, because we've been running on EOS for 3 years now, and you get the tour of duty as part of that, without question. So schedule the tour of duty. That's in your quarterly convo. That's a little EOS speak too.
Yep.
Just put those on the calendar, and then start to document. Then you have a little time based on where you're at, because you have to do it like right at the beginning of the quarter. You don't have to. And then document your guiding principles, and then document your tour of duty speech. And by speech, I don't mean write it out longhand and read it. I mean, write it, get your thoughts down, use it as a guide to make sure when you tell it to somebody, it is authentic and real. You're not just regurgitating something you heard on the Higher Power podcast, which wouldn't be offensive, but you know what I'm saying. It's got to come from you. It's got to be authentic and real. Your own
from the heart,
in the concept.
right?
Yep, totally.
Yeah. I mean, look at, if you don't care about your people, then quite frankly, you need to go find something else.
Yes, exactly. Totally.
Bryan, thanks so much for your time investment today. I really appreciate the content you brought to us, and I want to welcome you to the Higher Power Radio community. Now, what would be the best way in which members of the audience can find you, find your company?
Yeah, so 2 ways. Number one, go to LinkedIn. I'm a LinkedIn junkie. Please connect with me. Please send me a note. I'm one of those people that if you send me a note, you will get a personal note back. I don't have people running my LinkedIn, even though I've got a whole bunch of connections. So do that on LinkedIn. It's Bryan with a Y, and it's Neale. The E is silent. And Blind Zebra is the company on LinkedIn. Second thing is blind-zebra.com. You can learn all about the Blind Zebra sales operating system, which for a lot of your listeners, if you are EOS type person or you run on some operating system, it's basically EOS for the sales function. And you can find that at blind-zebra.com. And you now have an NFL referee you can ask rules questions to directly. So there's that.
You just opened yourself up to a lot.
Yeah, truth. That's okay.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for tuning in this week's episode of Higher Power Radio. A huge thanks to our team, Brian Colburn, Andrea Ballin, and Ayla Girard. If you're listening to the podcast, please subscribe, review, and share. After all, this show's for you, and want to continue to provide valuable content to you week after week. You can join the Higher Power Radio community at Higher, H-I-R-E, Power, P-O-W-E-R, radio, R-A-D-I-O.com, or you can drop me an email at rick@intertrue.ai. I'm your host, Rick Girard, and you have been listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. Aloha.
Thank you for listening to Higher Power Radio. Catch our LinkedIn Live show every Tuesday at noon, or download the podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform. We appreciate you joining us on Higher Power Radio with your guide to hiring success, Rick Girard.